Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, October 13, 2021, 7 Heshvan 5782. And I am excited to introduce all of you to this session with our very valuable guest speaker, Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe. Bravo. Bravo. I told you it's boring without Lisette. As the coordinator of the Women's Learning Group of the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue of Montreal, I, Gladys Perez Mualem, am pleased to welcome friends from around the world who have tuned in to hear Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe's presentation on the Judeo-Arabic dialect of Iraqi Jews. Thank you, David Nathaniel, Vice President of our synagogue and the President of the Iraqi Jewish Community of Montreal, for proposing Dr. Bar-Moshe be a speaker for the Women's Learning Group. Dr. Bar-Moshe has researched the Arabic dialect once used prominently among the Jews of Iraq. He has studied its regional variation, its history, and its probable future. The Women's Learning Group that had been initiated 12 years ago by our former synagogue Rabbi Shahar Orenstein has allowed this program, one that will inspire many to continue the cultural legacy of our Iraqi Jewish forefathers. A musical video of the once highly popular Iraqi Jewish singer Salima Murad Pasha, as well as a question and answer period, will precede the closing remarks by our synagogue president, Charles Shemi. Please note that next week's session will take place on Thursday, October 21st at 10 a.m. The speaker will be McGill music historian Christopher Silver, who has researched the exquisite music of North Africa and the role of Jews in that music. Everybody is invited. It's the same link all the time of Zoom. Please join us in all our programs. They are all interesting. Maybe not as interesting as today, but they will be interesting in their own way. On the following Wednesday, Rabbi Shahar Orenstein will review Mika Goodman's book, The Wandering Jew, Wandering with O, and the Search for Jewish Identity. Please join. Will be Wednesday. That session will be followed by a dance with the well-known Israeli folk dance instructor, Maurice Perez, who is sitting now with us. Reverend Ben Lolo will close the fall series by offering us a rich musical session. Everybody is welcome to join us for the rest of the series. I would like to invite now the Vice President of our synagogue and the President of Babylon Jewish Community of Montreal, David Nathaniel. Bevakasha bechabod.
Thank you very much, Gladys. So yeah, welcome, and I'm really honored to be part of this program. I think Gladys is an amazing, passionate person, and she wills all of us to participate and learn. And so we're extremely grateful to have you, Gladys, leading the way. You're really wonderful and amazing. And so, one thing leads to another. Sort of even you say, you at a wedding and a couple meets and then they get married and so on and so forth. Well, in this case, we ran a Farhud commemoration, a very successful one, not too long ago. And one of the attendees was Assaf. And after the commemoration, he sent me a message introducing him, explaining what he does, and that he would be more than open to sharing, some of what he's learned along the way and what his focus is. And I would be extremely. And I reached out to Gladys and I asked her if she thought this could be a good topic for one of her sessions, and she wholeheartedly agreed it would be. And so here we are today. And Assaf, I like on email, I thought you'd be like an older guy, but you're like a very young guy. And so we haven't met, but it's nice to finally, I guess, meet you virtually, and to say we're really fortunate to have you, and we really appreciate that you're taking the time, I'm sure, out of a very busy schedule to come and enlighten us. So thank you, Gladys. Thank you, Assaf. And we look forward to a very interesting topic today.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. I would like now to invite our dear friend Lizette Shashua to read for us the biography of Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe. Lizette Shashua, bevakasha bechabod.
Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe is a descendant of an Iraqi family who immigrated to Israel at the beginning of the 1970s. Hearing the Jewish Arabic dialect around him as a child, Assaf was always fascinated by it. After he had completed his master's in linguistics at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, describing some grammatical phenomena in Mandarin Chinese, Assaf decided to dedicate his PhD studies to the Jewish Arabic dialect of Baghdad. This resulted in a monograph about the grammar of the dialect that was published in 2019. Since then, Assaf has focused on expanding our knowledge about additional dialects that Jewish communities all over Iraq spoke. Especially these days, he's engaged in a research project about the Jewish dialect of Ana at Free University, Berlin. Dr. Assaf, thank you very much for joining us, and we are looking forward to hear all about it.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all so happy. It's morning there in Montreal, but I'm actually right now in Israel visiting my family. So here it's the afternoon. And I'm very happy to be here today and to finally get to know the Jewish community, Jewish Iraqi, Jewish Sephardi, Jewish whatever, even if not Jewish, everything is fine, community of Montreal. The topic of today's presentation is the uniqueness, history, and future of the Jewish Arabic dialect of Iraq. So, as I said, the topic of the presentation today is going to be the uniqueness, history, and future of the Jewish Arabic dialects in plural of Iraq. Yeah, so most of us are aware of the Jewish dialect that was spoken in Baghdad and South Iraq, Basra and Diwania and places like that. And we tend to think that all the Jews of Iraq might have spoken the same dialect, but actually this is not true. So many communities in the northern part of Iraq spoke different dialects of Arabic. And today we're going to give a taste of also these dialects as well. So we'll talk about why there is even a unique dialect of Jews that that was different from the Muslim dialect. What's the historical background that led to this situation? And we will talk about the future of these dialects, if there is any future to these dialects. So let's start with a short historical introduction. So many of you actually, I guess, lived some of these parts of the historical background that I'm going to give, and I'm sure that many of you are aware of the history of the Jews of this region. So I am not a historian. I'm not going to go into many details here. I'm just going to give the necessary information in order for us to grasp the context, the historical context of the presentation. So the story begins some 2,500 years ago, when the kingdom of Judea was destroyed by the Babylonian Empire. Jerusalem was conquered. The first temple was demolished, and the population was exiled to Babylon. Now, the exile to Babylon is described basically as a national disaster, you can say. So most of us are aware of the quote from Psalms, "By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion." This is very gloomy. Yeah, this describes a very gloomy situation of the Jewish community being exiled to Babylon and feeling abandoned, out of its place, etc. Slowly, we know, however, that the Jewish community in Babylon established its own community life. They had some kind of autonomy of their own. They had rich culture. Back then, they were speaking the language of the region, which was Akkadian, yeah, Babylonian, the Babylonian dialect of Akkadian. And here you can see a piece of archaeological artifact from back then, written in cuneiforms. Yeah, so and this piece of archaeological item is one of many others that were found, which can be attributed to Jewish families for sure. Yeah, the names that appear in these archaeological pieces are definitely Jewish names, and they deal with taxes, some accounting issues and things like that. But the names, the family names, the names of the people that appear on these pieces are definitely Jewish names. Yeah, so the Jews used to speak Akkadian, yeah, Babylonian back then. Then after, when Babylonian stopped being the lingua franca of the region, they moved to Aramaic. Yeah, so Jews spoke Aramaic, like the entire region, the entire Levant and Mesopotamia used to speak Aramaic back then. And then if we jump quickly forward to the Arab conquest, Jews started to speak Arabic like all the rest of the population of the area. Baghdad, the city, was established in 762. It was established as the capital of the Abbasid Empire. And it became the home for the biggest Jewish community back then. It is important to also note that Babylon was the biggest Jewish center back then in the world. Yeah, it was the center of biblical interpretation, and the Babylonian Talmud was edited in Mesopotamia, yeah, by the Jewish community, was edited and sealed. By the way, probably close to a city called Anna that was mentioned in my bio, yeah. So right now I'm researching the dialect of the Jews of Anna, of the town Anna. Probably the Jewish community of Anna is closely related, or at least geographically related, to where the Babylonian Talmud was actually edited and sealed. Yeah, so they take pride in this historical curiosity. So Baghdad was the center of Iraq back then, the center of the Abbasid Empire, and it was inhabited by many, many Jews. It was also the center of the Jewish community in Mesopotamia back then. The Arab period was actually the golden age of the Jewish community in Mesopotamia. So Jews lived back then in prosperity. They had their own autonomy. They lived quite well. All was nice and perfect even until the Mongols came and conquered Baghdad. So the Mongols' conquest of Baghdad is described as brutal, and basically Baghdad was destroyed. The city was destroyed after the Mongol conquered it. For a few decades, even more than decades, even centuries, basically we don't know much about Baghdad, about what happened in the city, and it is assumed that the city was destroyed and the population of the city was scattered all over, including the Jewish population of the city. Then after came the Persians, and then after the Ottomans, and under different rulers, Jews were treated differently. So some of them treated them fairly, some of them oppressed the Jews. It really depended on the specific ruler back then. Jews, however, were a significant part of the daily life in the region, mostly economically, in terms of economics and in terms of trade. Yeah. And it is not surprising then that Jewish families have packed their things and moved outside of Iraq to the Far East, to places in India and in the Far East like Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, Mumbai, etc., and established small Jewish Baghdadi communities where the Jewish Baghdadi dialect was spoken, yeah, for many years. So this happened in the 18th, 19th century, where Jews started to get out of Baghdad, also to the Far East. There they opened businesses, trade businesses, and they controlled the trade route from the Far East through the Persian Gulf, along the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, up north to Turkey, and from there to Europe. So this was a very important trade route. And cities like Basra and Baghdad and Aleppo in Syria were central and very important places, centers, trade centers along this route. And the Jews were in the center of all of it. So it is no wonder that much of the prosperity of the region back then is owed to the Jewish population of this region. They contributed from their knowledge and from their talent to the prosperity of the region. The British mandate at the beginning of the 20th century even opened the door for the political participation of Jews in the political life in Iraq. We know that even there was a minister, one of the ministers back then was Jewish. One of the ministers of the government of Iraq. This was good on the one hand, but on the other hand, it opened the door to some anti-Jewish sentiment or atmosphere back then that came to a climax in a very traumatic event, which was the Farhud that was mentioned earlier in 1941. During 2 days of riots, 179 people, Jews, were murdered, more than 2,000 were injured, and of course property, Jewish property was looted. It was a very traumatic, it is still a very traumatic event in the memory of people who are still alive today, who survived this event. So this was the Farhud in 1941. And this event, together with the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, has opened the door to the mass immigration of Jews from Iraq to mainly to Israel, but not only, of course, to Canada, to the UK, to the US, to Australia, and to other places in the world, but mostly to Israel. And the state of Israel in 1950, 1951, even initiated an operation called Ezra v'Nehemiah, in which they helped the vast majority of the Jewish community of Iraq to immigrate to Israel. Yeah, and after this operation, only a few thousands were left in Iraq, and also these few thousands mostly left the country in 1970, 1971, the beginning of the 70s, following the rise of Saddam Hussein's regime, who of course made the life of Jews miserable back then. And today it is estimated that only 4 people, old of course, still Jews, still live in Baghdad. So this is very, very, very quickly and roughly the 2,500 years of history of the Jewish community of Iraq. So with this knowledge in hand, we are going to move forward to talk about the linguistic background of the region. So first of all, we cannot speak about Arabic without speaking about Arabic dialects, yeah? Side language. And most of you know that if a person from Iraq would speak in their own dialect with a person from Morocco, for example, they would not understand each other. Yeah? It would be very difficult for them to understand each other without trying to move to standard Arabic. Yeah? In their own dialects, they are basically, they would be unintelligible for each other. The same with Yemeni dialect. Yeah? And the Yemeni's dialect with the Iraqi dialects are also very far away from each other. And you can see here on the map many different colors. Each color here represents a family of Arabic dialects, not even a dialect, a family of dialects. So the Arabic speaking world is a very, very, very diversified world. Now, as linguists, actually, we don't really speak about dialects or languages. This difference between dialects and languages is a political difference, yeah? Because if you, for example, consider Sweden and Norway, yeah? Swedish and Norwegian are 2 languages that are mutually intelligible. If a Norwegian person speaks Norwegian to a Swedish one, they will understand each other. But as we said, if a person from Iraq speaks to a Moroccan, they will probably not understand each other. And nonetheless, Swedish and Norwegian are considered 2 different languages, but Iraqi Arabic and Moroccan Arabic are still considered Arabic. The reason for that is political. That's it. Yeah, there is a political reason or a political intention around calling the entire Arabic-speaking world Arabic, and a political reason to distinguish between Swedish and Norwegian. Yeah? As linguists, we don't really care. We don't really bother if this is a language or a dialect. It's not really a matter of linguistic interest. What is interesting, or what we choose to look at, is the different features that these different varieties present. Yeah, we analyze these features. And that is what I'm going to do with you here in this presentation as well. Now, if we zoom into Iraq, yeah, into the map, then you can see that 2 colors basically dominate the Iraqi linguistic map. The greenish color in the north and the bluish color in the center and the south of Iraq. These 2 colors represent 2 different dialect families. In 1964, a very, very, very important linguist, Professor Chaim Blank, from the Hebrew University, published a book called Communal Dialects in Baghdad. In this book, he laid the foundations for everything that I'm going to basically say today. Yeah, he was a genius, and he was the first one to look seriously into the dialects that were spoken in this region and call them Mesopotamian dialects. Yeah, because as you see, these dialects are not only spoken in Iraq, they are also spoken in South Turkey, in some parts of Syria, even Jordan, and Kuwait, and even Bahrain. So these go beyond the Iraqi borders. This is why he called them Mesopotamian dialects. And he identified two subgroups within these dialects. He called these two subgroups the Qiltu dialects and the Gilit dialects. Now, many of you, I already heard at the beginning of joining this Zoom session, I heard that you speak Baghdadi Arabic, Judeo-Baghdadi. So you are familiar with Arabic, also maybe probably with the Muslim dialect of Baghdad. So you know that Qultu means I said in the Jewish dialect, but Gilit means I said in the Muslim dialect. So by using these two words, Qiltu and Gilit, Chaim Blanc coined the two main features that distinguish these two dialect families from each other. One feature is the way the Old Arabic sound qa is pronounced. Yeah? In the Qiltu dialect, it is preserved as qa. In the Gilit dialects, it is mostly realized as g, Gilit, yeah, not q. This is one feature. The second feature is the first person singular in the past tense. Yeah, so I in the past. So ana qiltu, ana suwetu, ana khbaztu, ana tbakhtu, etc. This two in the end represents the first person singular, I in the past. And in Qiltu dialects, it is preserved as tu. Yeah. In Gilit dialects, it is only t in the end. So these two features, the pronunciation of qa and the ending tu in the past, are the two main features that distinguish Qiltu dialects from Gilit dialects. Now, it wouldn't be interesting if it wouldn't say something about the people of the region. Yeah. And if we look at who are the people who speak Qiltu dialects versus who are the people who speak Gilit dialects, then we can see a very clear distinction. So non-Muslims, both Christians and Jews, speak only Qiltu dialects, whereas Muslims speak both Gilit and Qiltu dialects. For Muslims, it really depends where they live, whether they live in a city or whether they live in the rural side, yeah, or they live as nomads. If they live as nomads or in the rural side, they speak a Gilit dialect. If they live in the city, it then depends on where geographically they live. If they live in the south, they speak a Gilit dialect. If they live in the north or in southern Anatolia, they speak a Qiltu dialect. Yeah. So this is why the Muslims in Baghdad speak a Gilit dialect, but the Muslims in Mosul speak a Qiltu dialect. So if you ever listen to a Muslim from Mosul, you would definitely identify the similarities with the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. They speak more or less the same. Yeah, it's very curious. Despite the fact that they are Muslims and they live far in the north. So this is because they speak the Qiltu dialects. Yeah, they speak a dialect that is akin to the Qiltu family. So the dialects of the north that are here represented in green are Qiltu dialects. The dialects of the center and the south of Iraq are Gilit dialects. But then if we look at Baghdad, this point here, we see that it is embedded within a Gilit speaking region. Yeah, so the Jews and the Christians, by the way, in Baghdad, who spoke a Qiltu dialects, spoke a language isolate. They were speaking a language that was embedded into a region that was speaking a different dialect of the language. Yeah, so this is why the speech of the Jews and the speech of the Muslims in Baghdad was so different, because they belong to two different families of dialects. Yeah, and we will say a few more words about that later on. So if we focus more on Baghdad, then you can see that the Jewish dialect of Baghdad and the Christian dialect of Baghdad are both Qiltu type dialects. But the Muslim dialect of Baghdad is a Gilit type. Now here you can see some features apart from the Qa and the Ga and the Tu and the T that we discussed, that distinguish the Jewish dialect of Baghdad from the Muslim dialect of Baghdad. Now, I'm sure that most of you know these things, yeah, and this is only a partial list, but I will still mention some of them in order for you to grasp the difference. Yeah, you are aware of that, but maybe you never thought about it, yeah, because you are native speakers of these two dialects actually. So Old Arabic Qa is pronounced as Qa, as we said, versus Ga. So Qal versus Gal, yeah, he said. And Old Arabic Ka is pronounced as Ka in the Jewish dialect, Kan, but as Cha in the Muslim dialect, Chan, right? But not always. They don't say Ichun, they say Ikun, right? He will be. So there is some kind of conditioning to when you say Cha and when you say Ka. In the Jewish dialect, it is always Ka. Old Arabic Ra, so the sound Ra with a rolling tongue, is pronounced as such in the Muslim dialect. So Rah, he went. But in the Jewish dialect, it is pronounced like the modern Hebrew, Ra, or the French Ra. So Rah, he went. So Rah versus Rah. Even the vowels change. So the word ol, yeah, in the Muslim dialect, it's kul. In the Jewish dialect, kil. Yeah, so it is what we call a shva, a mid-central vowel. Also, long a, aleph, in the middle of the word is pronounced as e in the middle of the word in the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So jami', a mosque, versus jima', mosques, yeah, in plural, versus jima'. Also, final a is shortened in the Muslim dialect. So soda, black, feminine, soda, versus suda, long a, in the Jewish dialect. Not to mention the vowel change from u to o, soda, suda. Yeah. Also, final a. In the Muslim dialect, it is preserved as a. In the Jewish dialect, it is pronounced as e. So chibira versus kbiri. Yeah. And here you can see many differences, not only the final a versus final e, but also ra versus ra, and cha versus ka, etc. I will just read the next few examples and you will figure them out. So his bidlitu in the Jewish dialect of Baghdad versus badilta in the Jewish dialect, in the Muslim dialect of Baghdad. Ktabtu, I wrote. Ktabit. Katbit, she wrote. Kitbat. Katbu, kitbau. The word for here, honi versus hna. And the word for thus or so, hekev versus hichi. Yeah, so very, very, very different. And there are many more examples. This is just to help you figure this difference out, although I'm sure many of you were aware of that. Yeah. So this is the situation in Baghdad, a very, very, I would say, different dialect was spoken by the Jews and the Muslims. Now, if we zoom into the Qiltu dialects, yeah, So we said that the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, the red one here, is a Qultu dialect, but it's not the only one. There are many other Qultu dialects, and they can be subdivided into 4 different groups. One of the groups is the group of Qultu dialects that were spoken along the Tigris River. Yeah, so the Jewish and the Christian dialect of Baghdad, the dialect of Tikrit, and the dialect of Mosul. All of them have things in common. One of the main things that they have in common is the pronunciation of Ra as Ra. Yeah. Also in Mosul, they pronounce Rah and not Rah. Yeah. This is one of the main features of this sub-branch of the Qultu dialects. Another branch of the Qultu dialects is this green one that you see here along the Euphrates River. So places like Hit and Ana and Al-Bukamal and Deir ez-Zor, all these places speak slightly different Qultu dialects that were very, very influenced by the Bedouins that lived around them. Yeah, so this entire region is a desert, and it is surrounded by Bedouins. All of them spoke Bedouin dialects, and these dialects influenced very much the Qultu dialects that were spoken here. Another group of dialects, subgroup, is the Kurdistan dialects. So in cities like Erbil and Kirkuk, and also in Accra and in some other places, Kurdish was spoken by the local population, but the Jews spoke actually Arabic in these cities. Yeah, this is something that many Iraqis don't know. But Jews in these cities, in Erbil and Kirkuk, they spoke Arabic, yeah, within a Kurdish speaking community, yeah. And their Arabic, again, is a Qultu dialect, but it is slightly different from the Qultu dialects that were spoken in Baghdad, for example. I will give a few examples for that. So the sound dha, like for example, in the word dhahab, gold, yeah, they don't pronounce it as da, but as da, yeah, dahab, like in Syria and in Palestine, yeah. Palestinian dialects also do that. The same with the sound tha, for example, thnain, the word for two, the interdental th, like th in English. This is pronounced as ta, yeah, thnain, not thnain in this dialect. So these are the Kurdistan group. And another group of dialects, the fourth one, is the yellow ones that you see here. These are the dialects of Anatolia. So in cities like Mardin or Nusaybin Qamishli or in Urfa in Turkey, in these places, or Diyarbakir also in Turkey, in these places also Arabic dialects were spoken, not Turkish and not Kurdish. And these were Qultu dialects. So you can see from this map that Qultu dialects are basically dialects of minorities. Yeah. So Jewish minorities, Christian minorities, they were the main ones who spoke Qultu dialects. And the Qultu dialect family is mostly endangered. Most of the dialects of the Qultu family are unfortunately doomed to die soon. Yeah. So because they were spoken by minorities, and these minorities either immigrated or were oppressed in the past few decades, all these dialects are about to die, unfortunately. We'll say a few words about that in a few minutes. Just to complete the picture, I marked the Muslim dialect of Baghdad here in blue to distinguish it from the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. And another dialect that I marked here is the dialect of Aleppo, yeah? So Halab in Syria. So in Halab in Syria, a Syrian dialect was spoken, yeah, like the dialect of Damascus or the dialects of Lebanon or the dialects of Israel, Palestine, yeah, similar dialects, also in Aleppo. But still in Aleppo, there are many, many features in the dialect of the Jews of Aleppo that seem displaced from the Levantine dialects that were spoken around them. And if you check that closely, you can see that these features correspond to features that you find in Jewish Baghdadi, the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. And by the way, vice versa. Some of the features of the Jewish dialect of Baghdad cannot be found anywhere in Iraq, but are found in dialects like the dialect of Aleppo or Damascus. This means that there was probably a lot of connection between the Jewish community of Baghdad and the Jewish community of Aleppo. And this, by the way, can maybe solve one of the biggest problems that we have, and I mentioned earlier. After Baghdad was destroyed by the Mongols, we find no information about Baghdad for 300 years. Where did all the Jews go? Nobody knows. Maybe some of them went to Aleppo, to Halab. And this is maybe why we find a lot of features that belong to the Jewish dialect of Baghdad in the Jewish dialect of Aleppo and vice versa. Yeah. So I give this example to show you that linguistic features can serve as archaeological findings sometimes. Yeah. So if we don't know the history of the region, we can make some hypothesis about what happened based on linguistic features that we find that are common between different dialects. This is why the Qiltu dialects are so important, because they can teach us a lot about the history and the immigration, inter-immigration of Jews in this region. Now, we should say a few words about Jewish languages in general. Yeah. So the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, the fact that the Jews in Baghdad spoke a different dialect than the Muslims is not an isolated phenomenon. So other Jews around the world spoke their own dialect that was different from the dialect of their surroundings. So languages like Yiddish or Ladino or Judeo-Persian, or even in India, Judeo-Malayalam was spoken, and other dialects of French, etc. This is not an isolated phenomenon. And Jewish languages developed because of two reasons. One, because many Jewish communities kept to their own. Yeah, so they didn't mingle and they didn't have much communication or relations with their non-Jewish surroundings at the beginning. And this is why they kept their own speech. Another reason is because they were always reading the Bible and the scribes. So they kept close contact with Hebrew and Aramaic because of that. And they needed to invent words for religious issues, holidays, etc., in the other languages. Yeah. And sometimes they wouldn't do that. They would just use the Hebrew word or the Aramaic word for that. Yeah, so there was no point in inventing a new word in Arabic for that, for example. So this was the reason, that this is the background why Jewish languages have developed all over the world, not only in Iraq. Yeah, and some features of Jewish languages are what we call Hebrew and Aramaic elements. Yeah, you can find Hebrew and Aramaic elements usually in the vocabulary of these languages. A few examples from the Jewish dialect of Baghdad is the word mizal for luck. Yeah, so mazal in Hebrew, this is Hebrew. The word for commandment, muswa, yeah, mitzvah. These are all Hebrew words, but also Aramaic words. The word for Passover, shetacha, yeah, this word comes from Aramaic. So if you know, in the Haggadah, in Pesach, that we read in Pesach, there is an Aramaic passage saying, Hashata la 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 la. This year we are here, next year in Jerusalem. Yeah. So this year in Aramaic is Hashata Hacha. The Jews of Baghdad or Iraq in general coined this as a word to represent Passover, Shetacha. Yeah. So this is Aramaic, an Aramaic element in the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. Another Aramaic word is Barbennan. Yeah. God forbid. This comes from Bar Minan in Aramaic. And not only words penetrated into the language, but also constructions. Entire grammatical constructions came from Aramaic or Hebrew. So for example, the way the Jewish dialect of Baghdad marks a direct object. For example, he ate the apple. Yeah, akalu l'tufah. This construction is very, very weird. If I translate it literally to English, I will get he ate it to the apple. He ate it to the apple. Very, very weird construction. This construction is an Aramaic construction. Yeah, this is the way objects are marked in Aramaic, not in Arabic. But the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, because the Jews before used to speak Aramaic, they adopted this construction into their Arabic speech. Yeah, so not only vocabulary, but also constructions. Entire constructions were loaned into the dialect. Also, there was an advantage. The fact that the Jews spoke their own language around the world was beneficial because they could use it as a secret language. Yeah, so if they didn't want their Muslim or Christian neighbors to know something, they could simply use their own dialect. Or if they wanted to defend themselves against them, they could plot maybe in this secret language. So it was also an advantage. Another element, another feature of Jewish languages is that they tend to be archaic, tend to preserve archaic elements. And we already spoke about the qiltu dialects of these two features, the qa and the tu, that are very, very, very archaic. They go back to classical Arabic. Yeah. So Jewish languages tend to be more, to preserve more archaic features. Another feature is Hebrew alphabet. Yeah. So when Jews used to write Judeo-Arabic, they used to write it not in Arabic, but rather in Hebrew alphabet. And I don't know about you, but in my family, when we do the Leil HaSeder in Pesach, we read the Haggadah both in some parts of it, both in Hebrew and in Judeo-Baghdadi. Yeah, and you can see here the Hebrew Manishtana, and in this part you can see the Judeo-Arabic translation. Yeah, Bimat Ghayrat Hadil Lela Min Kull Layali. Yeah. And by the way, not only the passages themselves were translated, but also the instructions. Yeah, when to pour another glass of wine, where to put the matzah, etc. All these instructions were also translated. So, for example, here you can see imizgon kos sheni uichilonu qaddamu uirfa el ke'aram al masa min qaddamu, etc. Yeah. So also the instructions, what to do, when to pour the second glass, where to put it, how to raise it, etc. All of these were also written in Hebrew alphabet, not in Arabic alphabet. And the last feature that I would like to comment about in respect to Jewish languages is a term that we call in linguistics diglossia. Di as two and glossia as language. Yeah. So basically bilingualism. Yeah. This means that the Jews or Jewish languages, yeah, were spoken inside the house, the Jewish house and the community. But when the Jews stepped out of their house or the community, they usually spoke the local language. Yeah. They were bilingual in this respect. So the Jews of Baghdad, for example, spoke the Jewish Arabic of Baghdad inside their house and their community, but most of them were able also to speak the Muslim dialect of Baghdad when they stepped out of their houses, when they went to the market, when they went to the university, to school, etc. They could speak the Muslim dialect of Baghdad. And in this respect, they were diglottic, yeah? So bilingual in this respect. Now, I just want to bring the historical background and the linguistic background together and to summarize and to help you or to help us understand the linguistic situation of Iraq and Baghdad in specifically. Yeah, so how come two different dialects are spoken in Baghdad? So again, if we go back to the Middle Ages, then Baghdad was the central city, and the Jews in Baghdad were living in prosperity. So if you look at this quote from the book of Benjamin of Tudela, yeah, he was a traveler, and he wrote a journal describing his travels. In 1168, he visited Baghdad, and he wrote, "In Baghdad, there are 40,000 Jews." Yeah, a lot for that time. "And they dwell in security, prosperity, and honor under the great Caliph. And amongst them are great sages, the heads of academics, engaged in the study of law." Another quote, "In Baghdad, there are 28 Jewish synagogues." 28 Jewish synagogues in 1168. Yeah, so it was a very rich and prosperous Jewish community back then. And then we said that the Mongols conquered Baghdad, but actually it's more complicated than that. Yeah, so in the first conquest, Baghdad was destroyed basically, but it was still, people could still live in it. Yeah, the second conquest of 1401 was the big disaster, when the Mongols destroyed the city in a very, very brutal way. Yeah, and basically nothing was left out of Iraq. Yeah, so this is a map of Baghdad back then. Yeah, before the Mongol conquest, it was a round city. You can see it here in this image. Yeah, it used to be a round city. Here is the Tigris. Here you can see a channel and the wall surrounding the city. So this was the city back then. It was great, but then the Mongols came and it was destroyed. And as I said, the population of Baghdad scattered all over. Maybe the Jews, as I said, moved partly to Aleppo or to other places. We don't know. We don't really know. The city was basically uninhabited for 300 years. And then in the 17th century, the city started to re-establish itself. Yeah, and people started to come back to the city. And the people who came to the city came from the rural areas around it, and they were nomads. They came with their own Bedouin dialects. These dialects were Gilit type dialects. And slowly, these Gilit speaking people became the majority of the city. Yeah, and this is why the current dialect that is spoken in Baghdad is a Gilit dialect, because Baghdad was repopulated in the 17th century onwards by Gilit speaking people. The only people who spoke Qiltu dialects were Jews. Yeah, and these Qiltu dialects are probably the closest to what was spoken in the Middle Ages in Baghdad. So actually, the Jews of Baghdad speak the original dialect of the city. I don't know if you know that, yeah, but you can take pride in that. Yeah, the Jews of Baghdad and the Qiltu dialects in general are the original dialects of this region. Gilit dialects came from the south, from Saudi Arabia upwards. Yeah, and they are relatively new. So when we speak the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, or when we try to revive the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, we are doing something great, both for the heritage of the community, but also for the historical linguistics of Arabic as a language in general, because the Jewish dialect of Baghdad is basically the closest dialect to how Arabic was spoken hundreds of years ago in this region. So it is a very, very important dialect. Now I'm going to, let's hear the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So most of you speak it also, yeah? But maybe some of you don't, or maybe some of you were never exposed to it. So I want us to listen to the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. And after we do that, I will play a recording of the Jewish dialect of Anna, the town of Anna. And then you will be able to see the big differences in how the Jews of Baghdad spoke and the Jews of Anna spoke. Yeah, and we can discuss it, the differences afterwards. Yeah, if we have time. But first, let's hear the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. And what I'm going to play is a recording of my grandmother. Yeah, so my grandmother, whom you can see here in the picture, this is my grandfather. My grandmother, her name is Louise Albet Ma'allem. So she was born Louise Ma'allem, and she married my grandfather, Abraham, whose family name was Khlaschi. She passed away 3 years ago, but before she passed away, I was able to make some recordings of her, based on which I wrote my entire monograph and PhD. Everything is based on her recordings. Yeah. So we are going to hear one story, one folk story that she told me back then. The story is called Aziyat al-Milh. I translated it as the preciousness of salt. Yeah. And this is a nice folk story that can both give you a laugh, yeah, because it's a nice, cute story, and also can show you the dialect. Yeah, you can hear the sounds of the dialect. You can see here a transcription of what she's saying. I will play the recording. You can try following the transcription if you want, and you can try following the translation. Yeah, it's a translation that I made. Yeah, so let's hear it. The beginning is a little bit low. The volume is a little bit low, but then it gets stronger. Yeah, so don't worry.
كانوا مكان على الله والتكلان. كان في الملك، هذا الملك عنده بنات 2. فد يوم قلم هو قاعد يسافر للحج. ايش تريدون اجيب لكم صورات؟ كان الكبيرة قالت له جيب لي حواس وجيب لي هيك وجيب لي هيك. الصغيرة كانت تقول له تروح بالسلامة وترجع بالسلامة، وانا احبك مقدل ملح. ملح ايش قد عزيز، احبك هيك.
That's a beautiful, so cute.
Yeah, it's still playing. Don't, yeah.
Beautiful.
Still playing.
رجع من الحج، صحلم لبناته، قال الكبيرة ايش طلبت؟ عالية. الصغيرة ايش طلبت؟ تحبه مقدر الملح. قامت غدا، قال لي شكون الملح؟ خطأ تحبيني مقدر الملح. أنا ما أقبل، لا أريدك ولا أريد الملح مالك. زعلوا يا اتغدى من البيت. قامت هاي الخايبة ظلت فدناق عينة بن سلطان وحبة وتزوجها. هاي كانت تقول تريد تنتقم من أبوها. ليش تغدى من هاي قامت سوت له معجين كبير وما خلت لهم ولا نقطاية ملح بين الطبيخ. جو قعدوا ياكلون، ما قطقون ياكلون. قالت لهم ليش ما قد تاكلون؟ اشكون هاي؟ قالوا لا هذا كله بلا ملح، منين نطيق ناكله؟ قالت له صيحوا له لأبوها، هذا أبوها صيحوا له قالوا له أشم ما كان يفتهم الملح ايش قد لنا الزية. أنا سويتوها لا كلها بلا ملح خطر يعرف عزية الملح ايش قد قوية. والسلام عليكم.
So beautiful. Bravo, Assaf. Bravo. Beautiful.
Yeah, so that is really beautiful, and this folk story can give you both an idea of the sounds of the language, yeah, for those of you who never heard it, but also about the culture, yeah. So they were embedded inside the Muslim society, so their folk stories, everything was also shared with the Muslim society, yeah. So this story is definitely a Muslim story, a king going to the Hajj, etc. Yeah. This was a part of them, and yeah, this was a part of the culture. Now, let's listen to a short story from the Jewish dialect of Ana. Yeah, I'm sure that many of you never heard this dialect. That was very, very different from the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So it will be new also for those of you who speak the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So, for example, my parents who speak the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, when they heard this dialect for the first time, they were really amazed. They didn't know that there were so much differences between the dialects. This story is told by this nice lady, Bracha Rachamim, who lives in Israel, and I interviewed her. Her family came from Ana. She was born in Ana, and she can still speak this dialect. And she told me quite a tragic story about how her little brother drowned. Yeah. So this is a tragic story. I'm sorry for that, but it will give you an impression of the Jewish dialect of Ana. So let's listen to it.
قلت لك أبويا قتلوه بال44 سنة ال44 انقتل. كان بزاز الخزور قصدي، كان بزاز وقتلوه هو وابنه، هو وأخويا، وظلت أمي. من بعدين قبل خلف 3 سنين أخويا الصغير غرق طفى.
איפה?
بعانة بالشط نار براد.
איך זה קרה?
قلتوا لك كانوا يلعبون، كانوا عمره 7 سنين ماشو كذا، ودحفوته وراح، ولد صغير وراح. وامي كانت قاعدة وتستنظر وين شماي وين شماي يمتى يجي شماي. ظلمت الدنيا وقامت تدور، يدورون ماكو شي، يدورون ماكو ولا شي. لما بالتالي قالوا بس غرق وين يروح، لو ما من يمشي مشوا حتى فوتوا.
והלכו לשט ומצאו משהו או לא מצאו
לא
כלום?
מצאו, אבל חלף 4-5 سنين جاء واحد بدوي، جاء للبلد مالنا وسبروا له السبور. قال هو شاف بالشط، شاف ولد طلع السمان مال الحلسة ماله. قال شاف ولد وطلعوا بابا هو تفاسته بزمان وركبه خلف كم سنة بسبرة السبور ودفنوا، אבל أمي ما شافته.
وقال وين دفنوا؟
بعيد، جاء بدوي ما أعرف من وين، من هاي بديدة جاء. قال هو شاف ولد وطلع الشور، طلع السمان من القميص ماله. قال هو طلعه ورحم عليه ودفنوا، وأمي ما شافته بالتالي.
Yeah, so I hope you were able to see the differences, hear the differences between these two dialects. So this dialect of Ana, I already mentioned that it is a dialect that was spoken on the Euphrates. And this family of dialects was very influenced by the Bedouin dialects around them. This is why you can see a lot of cha there. Yes, so chan and cham and things like that. And other features, yeah, that are very distinguished from the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So this was just to give you a taste of different dialects in Iraq. Now, a few last words about the future of the Jewish Arabic dialects of Iraq. So unfortunately, I am not a bearer of good news. Yeah. So in linguistics, the main condition for the survival of a language is its transmission from one generation to another at home. Yeah, the dialect should be spoken at home and transmitted as a mother tongue to the next generations. Unfortunately, this is not the case anymore with the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So maybe I am among the last people who heard the dialect at home. Yeah, I will definitely not speak it to my children. Yeah, so this is unfortunate, but this is the reality, and we cannot do much to fight it. What we can do is make efforts to preserve, to document, and to understand the language. Yeah, and there are many initiatives out there. One initiative is what we are doing right now, which is very important, exposing people to this dialect, to the existence of this dialect, to the features of this dialect. This is very important. Education. Some other people, what they do, they open Facebook groups and they try to preserve the language through Facebook groups. There are several Facebook groups in Israel. The leading one is a group called the Meshamrim et Asaf Iraqit, so preserving the Iraqi language. Another language is Amthal, Pitgamim, yeah, proverbs in Iraqi, Judeo-Baghdadi. And in these groups, you can find a lot of discussions around vocabulary, proverbs, etc. in Judeo-Baghdadi. And this is interesting because these groups are ran by Israelis that were born in Israel in the 50s, in the Ma'abarot, yeah, in the immigration camps, to Jewish families. And they were ashamed of their language as children. They were preventing their families from speaking it because they wanted to seem Israelis, yeah, not Arabs. And now, after so many years, they embrace the language again. They understand that they were oppressed, yeah, their culture was oppressed, and they are now proud again in their language, and they try to revive it and relive it. Yeah, this is very beautiful. Another example is what you can see here, a book by an author called Sigalit Shir in Israel. She made a book about proverbs, Iraqi proverbs. She collected Iraqi proverbs, she translated them into Hebrew, she gave some cultural background to each and every proverb, and she made a cute drawing for the proverb as well. So this is another initiative. Other initiatives are more, I would say, academic. So this book is a dictionary written by Gila Yona in Israel. She collected, for many years, she collected many words and proverbs and phrases in Judeo-Baghdadi, and she created a dictionary out of it. This is priceless, this dictionary. It has proverbs and words and family names and collections of proper names and even swear words, an appendix with swear words, which is very colorful. So a very nice initiative. More academic things is, for example, the book that I wrote, yeah, The Arabic Dialect of the Jews of Baghdad, Phonology, Morphology, and Text. This is a more academic book. It is a grammar of the dialect. It describes the rules of the dialect. Yeah. So this is the book that I wrote. Also, for example, a recent initiative, Oxford University opened a Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. Yeah. And they opened courses in different Jewish languages. So Yiddish and Ladino and Judeo-Persian and Judeo-French and also Judeo-Baghdadi. So I teach, this semester I teach a course in Judeo-Baghdadi in Oxford University. And there were many, many people that enrolled to this course, more than 100 people enrolled. We couldn't accept all of them. So there is a lot of interest around Jewish languages right now. Some other initiatives, we have the Babylonian Jewry Heritage Center in Israel, and there are heritage centers all around the world, in the US and in Canada and in many other places as well. You have Dudu Tassa, an Israeli singer, who is son of Daoud el-Kuwaiti, yeah, one of the most famous, notorious singers in Iraq, yeah, a Jew that was basically the #1 musician in Iraq, yeah, in general back then. So he's his grandson, and he wanted to revive his music. So he created, he sings in Judeo-Baghdadi, and he created, this is one album, he has another one, he called it Dudu Tassa ve'Kuwaitim, Dudu Tassa and the Kuwaitis, yeah. Even stand-up is done in Judeo-Baghdadi now in Israel. So this guy, Kobi Pasha, is giving a stand-up comedy in Judeo-Baghdadi, and it's very funny, yeah? So many, many, many different initiatives are out there to revive, to document this dialect and other Jewish dialects, which are very, very important. But unfortunately, as I said, the conditions for the preservation of this language as a spoken language are not met recently, yeah? So unfortunately cease being a spoken language in the coming generations, unfortunately. Yeah, so I thank you for your attention. This is my email address in case you have any questions or you want to write to me. You can note this down. And of course, I'm open for questions right now. I will just turn on the light because I am sitting in the darkness, and I will come back to you in a second.
It was a great, great presentation. Thank you, dear Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe. I am mostly impressed by your pronunciation. You can say Khan, you can say Ran, you can say all the letters that usually the people who are not born in Iraq, they cannot say them. And it seems you can speak also some of the language. Bravo,
Yeah.
you get a lot of pride today. We are very happy to hear you and to enjoy your lecture.
Thank you.
Now I would like to invite David Nathaniel to put for us the music by Salima Murad Pasha, which is a continuous to Dr. Assaf's presentation, which is amazing. Thank you, David Nathaniel. I thought this video will put a smile on our face, and it is continuous to Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe to show another kind of languages. She's Jewish and she's singing in the Muslim. I hope you, this is a song that we all know. Now, David Basson from Israel, who would like to say a few comments. David, bevakasha bechabod.
Thank you very much for this very good presentation. But I just wanted to make clear and to discuss this issue of the dialect Jewish accent. Basically, as far as we are aware, and you already referred to it in certain ways, this is, as far as we know, is the dialect of Abbasid, Baghdad, and the north of Iraq. Wherever the Bedouin did not reach, the actual dialect is nearer to this dialect. For example, the Mosul dialect. And as far as the history, you refer to it as the 17th century. As far as we are aware, that actually the diversion happened around 250 years ago, when Baghdad was decimated by plague and floods and so on. And a lot of the Jews and Christians who were much more aware of quarantine and cleanness and went out of town to the countryside. Of course, in terms of proportional representation, the Muslims suffered much more in Baghdad than the Jews. So when the Jews came to Baghdad, they brought they kept the actual dialect of Baghdad, whereas years later, when Baghdad was basically populated by the Bedouin, they brought the actual dialect of Gilit compared with Qultu, which is not just a Jewish dialect, but nearer to Christian dialect. And all the people, and this was also the accent which is nearer to the Fusha Arabic. There is qa and ka thing, there is no g and ch. So all these influences of Bedouin and Persian and Turkish actually affected the main dialect of, let's say, Baghdad and the north of Iraq. The other point I want to make is that Eli Timman did in about 10, 15 years ago, dozens of recording of Iraqi Jews speaking the language. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your comment. That was really a great presentation that made all of us think about our past and what we learned, and to hear from you, Dr. Assaf, you did a great research. That it will be good for the new generation that something is written, something to refer about, because we are not transmitting enough. So to have something recorded in such a high level, it's really great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Assaf, and thank you, David Basson. Anybody else would like to give any comment, please? Any question? Any comment?
would like to say something.
Okay, so I wanted to just say how much I enjoyed Dr. Assaf and all the comments that were made with David Basson and Gladys. Thank you so much. I wanted to point out something that I did in the chat. There was an article that I wrote for Times of Israel based on information from Janet Dalal that she got me from the Ben Tzvi Institute. And I think it's very important that we as Iraqi Jews correct the history that has been written for us. So the official report on the Farhud that was done by the British and also the Iraqis right after the Farhud within the year, it said that 110 Jews and Muslims were killed in the Farhud. Later on, people said 179, which was what Dr. Assaf used as a figure, and 179. And I've used it in my law review article until I saw this article, because that's the only higher documented number. And we all knew that more people were killed in the mass graves. And you can see a picture of that on Wikipedia. And some people will estimate 400, some people a little higher number on the mass grave. In fact, according to the Ben Zvi Institute, which was reporting back to the Jewish Agency, and it was an official document, this is in pre-Israel Palestine. The Jewish Agency functioned as a shadow government for Israel and had emissaries in all the Jewish capitals around the world, including the Arab capitals and in Baghdad. They found that over 1,000 people were killed, and they documented within 6 weeks of the Farhud, 1,000 Jews were killed. And also they documented that in the local hospital, 120 people were killed in the local hospital by injection of poison. And if you look at Abraham Twaina's book, there's a nurse in that hospital who talks about it. The director of the hospital who called for the poison was lost his license for 5 years, which is compared to what happened, of course, a small penalty. I think it's important that we remember what happened and that we start correcting the figures, because we do have an official document to be able to do that with, contemporaneously written by Jews, with evidence from Iraqi Jews. And I'll just note that my mother, Annette Basri, was a young girl at that time in Iraq, and she was about 11 or 12 years old. And she remembers the Farhud, and she remembers seeing many, many streets in the Jewish quarter empty of any people, and the streets and homes all destroyed. And she said the 1,000 figure makes sense. So I would like all of you, if you could, to help document by using this fact. It's one thing to have the fact, it's been sitting in the Ben Zvi Institute, but it's another one for us to adopt it and use it as a group. Let us write our own history.
I think this is Miss Bracha did not pick up the whole Muslim dialect, and she was speaking partially in the Qultu dialect and partially in the Muslim dialect. So basically, she did not pick up the whole dialect to speak of. So you need to understand many people had to switch in the smaller counties of Iraq so that they can survive.
So maybe I was not clear enough. The dialect that Bracha speaks is a Qultu dialect. Yeah, it is definitely a Qultu dialect. It is heavily influenced by the nomadic Bedouin dialect that was spoken around Anna, the town where she lived. This is why you hear a lot of cha, etc. But it is a Qultu dialect. They say qa there, they say tu, Qultu, and many other features that belong to the Qultu family are prominent in her speech. Yeah, so it is a Qultu dialect, heavily influenced by Bedouin dialects. Yeah, so this is just to reiterate what I meant when I brought her recording. Yeah.
The reason I am saying that she did not pick up the full language, the reason I am saying that it's because, let's say, if I want to speak to you in Arabic, I can definitely speak it in total in the Qultu dialect without inserting one word of the Qultu dialect. But it is not, I don't really think that she was influenced at all. I think that she picked up half and half, that's all.
No, she was never influenced by the Muslim dialect because she never she never heard the Muslim dialect. Yeah, she was a child when she was in Anna. She lived inside the Jewish community. That's it. When she came to Israel, she was 6 years old. She was never exposed to the Muslim dialect. What she speaks is the Jewish dialect of Anna, which is different than the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. So if you try and you expect to find the Jewish dialect of Baghdad in Anna, you will not find it. They never spoke the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. They spoke a Qultu dialect that is akin to the Jewish dialect of Baghdad, but heavily influenced by the nomadic dialects around them. Yeah, it is a pure dialect, the pure dialect of the town of Anna, spoken by Jews. Yeah, she didn't try to imitate any Muslim dialect in her speech. This is not her intention. She was very young when she came to Israel. Yeah, just to clarify. And by the way, she's not my only informant. So if I wouldn't base my entire thesis on her. Yeah, I have a lot of other informants that came from Anna that I interviewed who speak the same. Yeah.
Okay, would you say the Jewish in Basra would speak the Qaltu dialect?
Of course they do. They speak
Okay.
a very similar dialect to the dialect of Baghdad. But yeah.
Then I will refer you to, I don't know if you know her. I will refer you to Huda Rafael. Okay, Huda Rafael. In their house, they had to speak the Muslim dialect, not because they wanted to, it's because they're, because they were worried that they were going to get killed. So basically, that's the reason why I was saying why this lady was speaking in such a way. So basically, in a very small community, and when things become smaller and smaller, you kind of have to assimilate so that they don't discover you.
That's true.
That's all what I'm saying.
This is not the case of Anna. Anna was still a substantial community, yeah, and they lived among Muslims, but their relations with them, especially in later years, like the years where Bracha was born, they didn't have a lot of contact with Muslims back then. So definitely the dialect that Bracha is speaking is representative of the Jewish dialect of Anna, which is different than the Jewish dialect of Baghdad. Yeah, that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Put your please, so you can have another like separately.
Sure. And by the way, I want to use this opportunity to ask you, yeah, if any of you knows any speakers of dialects that are not Baghdad, Basra, South Iraq, or Anna, yeah, more to the north, like the dialect of the Jews of Kirkuk or Erbil, or places in Syria like Qamishli or Ufa in South Turkey. All these Qaltu dialects of them are almost not explored at all. And I want to use the years when we can document these dialects in order to do that. So if any of you knows of somebody from these places who still speaks Arabic, I would appreciate it very much if you can contact me with them.
Dr. Assaf, you are doing a great thing. Not only you brought the whole community together from all over the world, but you are making research about something that we didn't think of doing it, that we should be the ones who preserve the language, but you are doing it for all of us. It's so beautiful for the future generation, and you did it in a very interesting way. It's a beautiful to listen to you, and even though we lived there, we still learned a lot from you, from the history of Iraq, from the language, from everything. Bravo, you did a great job. And we all thank you for that. I think that this future generations will benefit a lot. And now we feel good that you are doing it for all of us. I really thank you.
I would like to make some comments.
Okay, Sami Surani, please.
Yeah, do you hear me? Well, I would like to say that the turning point in the spoken Arabic of the Iraqi Jews took place in around the year 800, 850, when Saadia Gaon ben Yosef al-Fayoumi took the position to be the chief rabbi of Baghdad. He was surprised because his prosperity at that time among the Jews took away all their spiritual life. the 3 yeshivas were closed, and the Jews speak more Arabic than words of Hebrew or Aramaic. So he translated the Haggadah of Pesach and the daily prayer into Arabic. That was his translation, as well as some books of the Bible. But I would like to say that the Jews who went, let us say, to India and stayed there for a generation, it is true they spoke Arabic. I had the chance to meet few Jews who came from India when I was in Israel. There were 5 generations born in Bombay, and the other was about 3 generations of Kolkata. And they decided to speak Arabic with me. I find it not easy to understand the old words that they used that we never speak in Iraq by the Jews in my generation. So as a matter of fact, each generation is influenced by his environment, and that there are still some who keep all the old expression and old systems. And at this point, I would like to remind Dr. Assaf that I exchanged email with you about the collection of proverbs by Khayat, Abraham Khayat. He was asked by the Hebrew University to collect those, not from the middle class or upper class Jews, to collect it from poor families, because the poor families were not influenced by outside culture. And you will find in his collection all kinds of words and expressions that we don't use in our everyday life. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Sami is like our encyclopedia. Whenever we are missing something from our history, our language, or anything, we refer to Sami. Sami has always a fast answer. He knows. Thank you, Sami.
Can I add something? Gladys?
Emil Cohen, please, you would like to say something?
Just one moment. Sorry, Gladys. Just one moment. Sorry, Sam. I think Liddy wants to say something.
Yeah. Can I just add something to what Sami was saying when he mentioned every generation there is a change in the language? Sami left when the state of Israel was born in the early 50s. Our family stayed behind. We didn't leave until 1962. And I find when we speak Arabic, there are certain words and expressions that he uses that I've never heard before. So when it came to me speaking Arabic, some of the things that they were using at home, we were not using. And people of my generation that I grew up with were not using either. So whatever they were using went with them to Israel, disappeared with them. It didn't stay behind. I understand what he says, but everyday words like qadah, like I don't remember, he uses words that we never used before in our everyday talk. I just wanted to mention that.
Can I
Thank you, Lydia. I think the language was evolving all the time. It is never the same. There was always new words because we keep learning new languages and we keep mixing it with our Arabic, and that's why our Arabic is so interesting. It's a mixture of many, many languages. And Dr. Assaf Bar-Moshe is discovering all of them together.
I really enjoyed your presentation, Assaf. It was like, for someone who's, to be honest, my parents spoke Arabic at home to some extent. I picked up a little bit of it, but certainly not to any great degree. But it was very interesting, and I learned a tremendous amount. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you, everybody. I'm going to let you continue the discussion. I myself personally have to leave. Thank you, Gladys. Appreciate everything.
All right, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I really enjoyed that. And I also want to compliment you, Gladys, for making that, particularly that comment regarding the development of languages. The language changes a lot in time. And one of the things that we are using these days, for all the Iraqis, not just the Jews, some of the Fusha is coming into the language now. So a lot of the people currently speaking in Qaltu, they are adding Fusha words to it. And you find that all these, what was mentioned earlier about Eli Timmons recordings, you'd find a lot of it, people started talking in Fusha. He asked them straight away, first of all, please talk in Jewish Arabic, and they start with Jewish Arabic and then they go to Fusha, because this is gradually interacting with the common language. Right, but I want to say to us, Dr. Assaf, is that this question of Qaltu, it's not fair to say this is a Jewish language or this is a Jewish thing, because you said it right at the very beginning. You said the people in Halab use it, the people in the Christians use it, Mosul use it, they all use Qaltu. So we can't take credit for that. Although that was, by the way, just to add, this was the language that was used at the time of Harun al-Rashid. So that before the Bedouins came in and before the Shah came in from the Persians, by the way. At times of Ma'mun, a lot of Persians came into to Iraq, and that's got mixed up. They can't say K, they say Ch. That recording of Salim Amrad, it's not recording of Salim Amrad.
This is
That
what
is
Lizette
a play.
yes.
That was a series, a play. It was done
Yes,
on television.
I thought it is very nice.
It is very nice, but it was a play on television, right?
I said it, not her. I didn't say it her.
Yes, Lizette told
I
me
said
it's
it's neither her nor Nabar Ghazali.
nice. It was done very nice.
Gladys wanted to show the atmosphere of the language, and I think it worked.
Yeah,
It's
I want to
Salima Pasha's
with
song.
her.
You could have used the actual thing. You got my website.
We don't have the actual thing.
Sorry? Have you
I
tried
just wanted you to be happy and sing with her.
Gladys, it was very fitting. Thank you.
Yeah, it was very
purpose, to make
nice.
you
And I
happy.
danced with her too. Ashti did
Odette
And to
Maslia
sing
has
with
something
her
to say.
while you are
She has a-
mute.
It was the cherry on top.
It was.
Thank you.
It made
I
me
wanted
dance.
you to sing while you are muted.
Yes.
So you enjoy yourselves.
כל הכבוד, Dr. Assaf. Very well. This week with the parasha Lech Lecha, a message to Abraham from Hashem, which means go forth, move on from your home of Or Kasdim in Mesopotamia to the promised land. And somehow that's exactly what you are doing by bringing us back, explaining us how we could move on with our history and enrich it more and more. For all of us Jews, Sephardic and Ashkenazi, the proud heritage of the sages of the Talmud is still here with us, and we are cherishing it. It reminds me a book written by a good friend of mine that you probably know. He's a literature professor at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And the book is called Le Cri de l'Arbre, the screaming of the tree. And the Talmud, he says that when you uproot a tree, it pushes such a scream that his screaming is heard all over the world. The message here is that we are all hearing today the voice of the past, and we have to preserve that heritage of the past. And thank you, Dr. Assaf, for reminding us our roots, our dialects, and kol hakavod to you, and Mechail El Chai. Toda rabba. And naturally, toda rabba to our dear Gladys Moalem for initiating this beautiful sessions of Women's Learning Group. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Edmond. Thank you. That was a great speech from you. That we always rely on you. You are the backing of all our speeches and all our sessions, and you always give us all the good things that we need. That Edmond Elbaz was our ex-president of the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue. He just left. He never left us, even though now he is the ex-president, but in fact, he is involved in everything, and all the good things we have in the synagogue continue to be from him. He directed behind the scenes everything. And we thank you so much, Edmond. And for sure, I rely a lot on him. Everything I do, I check it with him. I have to know if I am going in the right direction. And he always direct me and help me and always add a good thing to my plans. Thank you very much, Edmond.
You're very welcome anytime. And
Thank you.
All I cover to all of you and Hatzlacha Rabba.